There's this notion that somehow there's moral equivalence between what the terrorists did and what we do, and that's absolutely not true. We were very careful to stop short of torture. The Senate has seen fit to label their report torture, but we worked hard to stay short of that definition.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney said out loud what so many people believe, yet apparently are scared to say out loud. If it means keeping America safe, you do what is necessary and stop trying to compare it to what our enemies will do to kill the innocents. And a new poll reveals what to some is an uncomfortable truth. This gentleman served his nation proudly during the Vietnam War, partly in the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. More recently, he served as defense counsel in the Abu Ghraib prisoner abuse trials. It's a pleasure to welcome Gary Myers to MidPoint. Gary, we thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Gary, here is the poll. It finds that a majority of Americans believe that the harsh interrogation techniques used on the terrorism suspects after 9/11 were justified, even as about half the public says the treatment amounted to torture. Doesn't this tell us, though, that basically what this report came out and said is not correct? People do not always see this as torture. They are willing to do what it takes to make America safe.
Well, it also says that the question is too broad, and that's really the point here. Some of these techniques that were known and were clear violation of the Geneva Conventions were outside the boundaries of international standards. Now, much of what was done, however, was within those boundaries. So it is really a question of how one defines the problem. The situation at Abu Ghraib was not generated by these few young enlisted personnel. In fact, it existed prior to their coming there. I personally interviewed then Major General Jeffrey Miller, and pointedly asked him the question, were the Geneva Conventions being violated before the MPs who were charged arrived at Abu Ghraib? His answer was a terse yes. So this is a complex problem that does not lend itself to simple questions or simple answers. I understand what the poll says, and I fully appreciate the concerns of the American people. We have international responsibilities that include protecting our own troops in times of war when they are captured. So the answer to your question is yes and no, and it depends upon what techniques you are talking about.
From the perspective of the CIA, the people who are now the ones who are at the core of all this, and from a legal perspective as well, do you see it now getting to a point where the people who are now charged with doing their job, protecting America, are going to think twice, think three times, maybe not do their duty, fearful that when they come home, they're going to be brought up on charges now, and this will hurt the security effort?
Clearly an issue, clearly a problem. And one can look back to Abu Ghraib and understand how, in part, it got generated. It wasn't just the CIA. It was this hiring of government contractors to replace uniformed personnel in an effort to demonstrate that Mr. Rumsfeld's efforts at reducing the number of troops necessary for combat was an accurate assessment, notwithstanding General Shiseki's disagreement. And these contractors formed a base for misconduct in the field that would never have happened with military personnel. And so, again, these are complex questions, but most assuredly, in the environment that exists today, because of the precursor conduct, people in the field are going to be more and more reluctant to place themselves in harm's way legally. And you're quite right in that regard.
I have about 30 seconds left. In the environment that we are in today, and with your experience, is it not fair that with this poll behind us as well, we have to understand that sometimes in the theater of war, things are done that no one is proud of, but you need to protect a nation?
You need to protect a nation. You need, however, to also protect its moral standing in the world, because that acts as a very powerful tool in our quill of powerful tools. So before we go running off either to the far right or the far left, I think we need to take the time to consider the consequences of the decision-making process that we engage in as a nation.
Next time we gather, we need to discuss some of those consequences as well, because I think you are correct. That is the next step in the conversation. Gary, we want to thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. A very happy holiday to you and your family.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, break, and we're back with the continuing tale of one man determined to bring this nation together, yet at the moment would seem better at tearing a political party apart.